Welcome to Dynasty Football Analytics. I am Adam Wilson at AJWilly2 on Twitter, and I'm here with my friend Jordan McNamara at McNamara Dynasty on Twitter. So we are doing an impromptu show, Jordan, which I have a feeling that we are going to be doing a lot of these. So big news. The Cleveland Browns traded for Odell Beckham Jr. So we just thought we should be doing a podcast to talk about our reactions and the implications from this. So I am obviously in Cleveland, Ohio. So this is a big thing for us because I'm a Browns fan and a Browns season ticket holder. And not only does this help my team, the resale prices of my tickets just went up. So pretty exciting day for us.
It's probably, do you have season tickets?
Yep.
So do you already have them for locked in for next year?
Yeah, I've already started paying on them.
Okay. So the price is locked in. Don't have to change.
Yep. Club seats. They're great seats.
I would imagine you could probably make at least a 50% return on your investment, right?
Yeah, I would assume so. I mean, funny enough, I actually bought season tickets for the Cavs 2 days before LeBron James came back.
Not bad business when you can get it.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
All right. So you were sitting at home and your phone started buzzing and you saw a tweet from, I'm assuming, Mike Garafolo or Ian Rappaport or Schefter, and it said OBJ has been traded to the Browns. What was your initial thoughts?
Well, I had a tip that this was coming. I wasn't sure how much I believed it. In terms of, it was said to me by someone who would have had reason to have inside knowledge. Yeah. I wasn't sure how likely with the news this week. I've been sort of skeptical about everything because of the Antonio Brown stuff. I'm not, I'm just with a healthy dose of skepticism on everything. I sort of had been told that this might happen for, I don't know, it's probably been 10 days now.
Okay.
And obviously I didn't say anything about it because I didn't want to put anyone in position or anything like that. And that's not really the business that we're in. But it's been something I've been watching. So it wasn't a complete shock to me. Obviously Josina Anderson reported today that it was an AFC North team that it was coming. Yeah. And this happens. I think it's right. I'll be honest with you. As I was sitting on my couch, there were expletives just sort of hurling from my brain almost to my fingers and didn't quite make it to Twitter because something, if there's anything that the past 24 hours or 72 hours, I would say, has told us, it is that when people tell you that situation matters or that they know situation or that they think they know situation or, obviously the situation is bad for X drafted rookie. I'm talking about James Washington, or the situation is bad because, obviously David Njoku is a better fantasy asset than Evan Ingram because his situation's better, right? All of that stuff, it's BS. I'm serious. It's BS. And you know what? We're not in a position to know how good situation is. And everyone wants to think that they're Nostradamus and can predict in advance about what's going to happen year over year. Has the last 72 hours not stood for that we don't know, right? We're not in a position to be able to year over year predict what's going to happen in terms of situation. And that situation, injuries happen, trades happen, cuts happen. All of these things happen, and we're living in the NFL now where more trades are happening than, I don't have any specific analytics on this, but I'm sure that someone will in terms of the numbers that it's happening in. But just for an anecdotal thing, right? Antonio Brown and Odell Beckham Jr. got traded in the past 72 hours. Two of the 5 best receivers in the NFL, right? We are in a different world where there's more transactions, right? There's more aggressive, front offices, right? These things are more possible now than they were 5 years ago. And I think we need to acknowledge that. And I'm not saying every player that you need to take, it could land in a great situation. But when you dock players that have strong profiles or vice versa, when you vault players up that have crummy profiles, I'm talking about you, Antonio Callaway, because they have immediate situation, that's bad process. And this past 72 hours has gone to expose that. And if there's anything that makes me feel good, it's that in the past 3 days.
Well, I'm glad you just yelled at everybody for that. So that was
not yelling at people per se. I'm more just, we lose our minds, right? Collectively we lose our minds, and people go out and say, purport to just know, right? And that's one thing, one thing that I will pride us on is I will never purport to tell our listeners that we know something, or that we are able to predict something, or that, obviously something's going to happen. You will never hear those words from us, right? Because these aren't obvious things, right? These are not things that we can't, that we should be talking about certainty with, right? That's why you should look at it with historical comps, and right, you should know what the background of guys like Evan Ingram are, right? What's their priors, right? What's the prior for a first round tight end? What's that look like, right? And sort of know that from a value perspective, and regress towards that, right? We should be sort of aggressively going towards what player profiles do, and a lot less than the immediate situation. And, I think that when people give that advice, it's really bad. And situation matters maybe way down the line in terms of, hey, this guy's a clear backup running back in round 17 of my startup draft. Right? That's when situation matters. Not especially at a position like tight end, right? Especially at a position like wide receiver. I have a hard time with all of that sort of advice, and I see it all the time. And it's really important to remember right now that, like, hey, I need to know where David Montgomery goes, because that'll that will depict how much value I should have on him, right? That's the narrative we're seeing now. This is a good reminder that is a terrible idea.
No, I totally agree. And the point that you made there about, the league changing and the trades for players, it's almost like turning into the NBA, in how they are not the NFL is so used to trading draft picks or a player for draft picks. And now you're starting to see, especially with John Dorsey in Cleveland, he's trading player for player, and there's a lot of player movement. And I think that this is just the start of that, and it's just going to ramp up. And I think it's going to become more and more common. And I think that there's going to be a lot of moving players around and pieces around, and that's going to affect situations a lot. So it's exactly what you said. It's going to be even less predictive than before. I mean, Odell Beckham just signed the biggest contract for a wide receiver ever this past offseason.
Like 12 months ago?
Yeah, and he just got traded. Right. So that doesn't even matter anymore.
Right.
So I think
it should, by the way, I'm not excusing their process. The Giants have played this thing horribly, because $16 million of dead cap space because of this blunder. They got good compensation back. I'm not going to, I'm not going to jump on their grave, but at the same time, we talk about having sort of a long-term plan. Sometimes I wonder if we have a better long-term plan than some of these teams. And I'm not saying that we're better than them at what they do, but just if you could play it out more than 12 months in advance, that just seems like really bad. Didn't they had to have known that Odell Beckham was a headache, right? If they got sick of him that quickly, they should have known better, right? Or am I just wrong on this?
No, I totally agree. But I to your point about, us knowing these things, and maybe these NFL teams don't have very good process and they don't have a plan. Do you remember when the Browns traded essentially cap space for Brock Osweiler and got back a second round pick? When that happened, guys like Bill Polian were killing us, right? Us, a Browns fan here. He was killing the Browns. And then if you look at it, the Steelers literally did the same thing, except got the worst end of the deal. And the NFL teams are just like, yeah, well, he had to go, and yeah. So like, what's the difference? I mean, they just did the exact same thing. I think the Antonio Brown situation was handled poorly. I think the New York Giants handling this was not good either. I sometimes wonder. This is why you have guys like Mike Mayock that turn into NFL GMs, because they have just as good of a shot as some of these people in front offices now. So, all right. So let's get into. You want to do the Browns first, and what this means for the players? Let's do the Browns.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, initially, Odell Beckham Jr. What are you thinking on? How does this affect him?
Let's do this. I think there's two different conversations.
Okay.
One about what we think, and then one about what we think the market thinks. Because I think that those are two important things. So my reaction to this is I'll be with the market. What I think would be with the market is I think it really helps his value.
Yeah.
I think he's locked in as obviously a top 5 dynasty wide receiver, probably higher than that. Yep. I mean, I would have a hard time seeing him below probably 3 or 4, I would guess. I think he's right in that conversation. And I think that's where the market's going to be. I think the market's going to like the fact that he's with a good quarterback long term.
Yeah, and I just like you said, I think when you look at startup drafts, you're all of a sudden we're seeing him now at 109, 110, something in that range, and he's maybe wide receiver 2 or 3. I think that people are just going to look at Odell Beckham and say he's with Baker Mayfield. I'm taking him over Michael Thomas. I'm taking him over DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, to me, he's going to get drafted as wide receiver 1. There might be some drafts that you're in where he's, maybe he goes as wide receiver 2, but I definitely think that he's going to get a bump from this in terms of the marketplace.
I'm just looking real quick at the DLF mock drafts. They have 6 of them in the month of April. Mm-hmm. He went as wide receiver 2 in 3, I think 4 of them. Okay. He went as wide receiver 3 and one of them, and wide receiver 4 in one of them.
Yeah, I think that the outliers where he's falling to 109, I just don't think that's going to happen anymore. I don't think you're going to see him as a wide receiver 3, the third wide receiver drafted in startups anymore. I think that it's the new shiny toy. The latest news. Yeah, I think he's going to get a bump, and he's going to be up there probably ahead of DeAndre Hopkins at this point.
Non-Superflex, who do you have at 102?
Non-Superflex?
Yeah.
I'm
talking startup draft, sorry.
Yeah, I'd have Barkley 1, and I'd like to trade out, honestly. I'd probably have Zeke 2. It's Zeke or Gurley for me.
Both of them ahead of Odell Beckham?
No, now I think Beckham's probably 3rd. I don't know. I mean, it can go either way. The problem is that I'm going to be
a conversation, though, right? Like that's a conversation more than it was 24 hours ago.
Correct. Yeah, that was not a conversation before, and I was sitting in a draft at 109, hoping that Beckham fell to me. So, and that's not going to happen now. So, yeah, you can make the case that Beckham goes first, or but the wide receiver 1 in the top 3 or 4.
Yeah. What do you think this does to the ancillary pieces in Cleveland? Let's talk about receivers.
Yeah, so I mean, Callaway, you brought up Callaway. This was a 4th round receiver, right? Like, you shouldn't have been betting on him having a good situation. You should have been out on him if anyone wanted him at this point, or, at this season. To me, I actually think it helps Jarvis Landry. I think that they're probably going to put him back in the slot now. And I did like how they're probably going to move him everywhere. I just think it's going to free him up. I mean, watching the Browns all year, he was surprisingly getting double teamed quite a bit. So I think that while his value is probably not where it was in Miami, it's probably better than it was. He's probably going to perform better than he did in Cleveland last year.
I think that's fair. I mean, he's wide receiver 21. He's going, I mean, just the names. He's going behind T.Y. Hilton, behind A.J. Green, behind DJ Moore.
Yeah,
And then he's going ahead of Cooper Kupp, Calvin Ridley, and the rookies.
Yeah, it's funny because earlier on today, a buddy of ours shared a startup draft with us, and I was looking at his wide receiver core, and he had Jarvis Landry on there, and I just said, Landry's the one that he's the outlier there that I don't like. And all of a sudden now that looks a little bit better to me. I don't think you're going to see Jarvis Landry as a top 10, dynasty wide receiver. I don't think he's going to be a wide receiver 1 this year. But I think his value does get a bump because I think this offense is going to be fast and explosive. Callaway's still going to play a part in it, while I don't think that he's this big dynasty future asset or anything like that. I think that they're going to be fast and they're going to move the ball, so.
I thought it was interesting too that I think Callaway, it's going to be tough to sell Callaway right now. I mean, this is what you get when you buy a day 3 wide receiver in round 2 of rookie drafts, right?
Yep.
When this happens, you deserve everything you get. And,
yep.
I'm not trying to spike the football on anyone, but this is a great example of what happens. I mean, it just.
And people actually wanted him last year. He was traded in a lot of leagues for, pretty premium pieces or parts of deals. He was a part of deals for premium pieces. People had a high value on him because of him being in Cleveland with Baker Mayfield. Last year was the time to sell him, unfortunately.
Yeah, it certainly was. I just, it's just, man.
So do you want to include Njoku into that too?
What do you think about Njoku? See, this is what I think is interesting. Like, I think this might be the most interesting question for the whole bit.
So we didn't talk about this ahead of time, so we might disagree on this. So the way I look at Njoku is I think he is ready to take a leap this year, but ultimately he is going to be that big play tight end. And that's not, he's not, I don't think he's ever going to fill the role like the Travis Kelce or the Zach Ertz role. So he's going to be tight end 8, tight end 6, something like that at the end of the season. Like, that's the player that he's going to be. And the reason is because there's simply not enough targets for all these guys. But the reason why I think he can be effective and, a dynasty asset is because of his big playability. And, he's fast, he's big, he can make these highlight catches. I think he's going to get big chunk plays and he's going to be valuable in your lineups. Now, if you're having the conversation between him and Evan Ingram, I'm going Ingram, every day of the week on him. But, I don't think that it's going to hurt him significantly. I still think he's going to be value, but I think his value took a little bit of a hit.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you in terms of that. I think I didn't really face this situation. I guess I did in a startup I was in a startup. I think we might have talked about it between, and I don't do rankings or anything, and maybe that'll change, but I'm not in a position where I sort of need to commit at any given time who I feel one player over another unless I'm drafting.
Agree.
And we had a scenario where it was Evan Ingram or David Njoku. We were on the clock. And we took Njoku. Part of that, I've always liked Evan Ingram more. Part of what got me to Njoku over Ingram in that particular scenario, there was, I guess, 2 key factors. One, three, I guess. I don't think they're incredibly different in terms of players and profiles. 2, I think that we were stacked with Mayfield, right?
Yeah.
So when we took Njoku, it was a Mayfield Njoku stack, which I'm sort of embracing as a dynasty strategy a little bit more when the profiles are really safe. And 3, my co-owner liked Njoku over Ingram. So all of those 3 things made me more comfortable going the other way on that. So we took Njoku over Ingram. I think that, if you look at, I guess I look at this and I think here's the problem a little bit with Njoku. And then my question is, are we doing the same thing back to Ingram? We valued situation over right, over profile, right? We looked at situations so much and said, ooh, this situation is really good. And now it doesn't look quite as good because you're having all these targets taken up. Are we going to do the same thing to Ingram? Right? I mean, that's the question. But
you mean to Njoku?
No, going back, right? Are we going to do what we did to pile on Joku's grave like everyone did with Ingram? Because Ingram got hurt and he had weapons around him. And how could he be this good with this? I'm trying not to swear because I told myself I would not put it on Twitter. So, but with this crummy quarterback, right? And that's, we sort of had this thing where everyone was vaulting up Njoku because the situation was better than Ingram. And now people are going to do the exact opposite. And that's what I was just yelling about 5 minutes ago. So all of that said, I like Ingram more, but I don't have they'll flip flop in value, I'm sure. Right. Anyone that was, they're really close in terms of ADP.
Mm-hmm.
They're going right next to each other in terms of tight ends 5 and 6. And I think that's fine. Like, I think there's a tier of tight ends essentially that goes from OJ Howard at 4 to Hunter Henry at 8. Right. Yep. So you've got Howard, Ingram, Njoku, Ebron, and Henry. Right. Those 5, they're fairly close in terms of profile and all that stuff. I have my preferences in there, but I think that's a fair tier. I would have Ingram. I think I'd have Ingram as tight end 4, and I think that would be. I'd certainly have him over OJ Howard, and him and Njoku are really close, and so that's about where I would put him. I don't. I think that might be a little contrarian, but I don't really think it should be. And so I sort of look at all that, and I like Ingram quite a bit. I think it boosts him up a little bit, but I'm not going to move him rapidly. And I like Njoku quite a bit, and it's going to probably bump him down a little bit in terms of what his ceiling could be, but I'm not really going to move him that much, I guess would be sort of what I would say. He finishes as what? Last year, Njoku finishes as tight end 9.
Yeah.
He was targeted 88 times.
Yeah, and that kind of is going to my point, right? Like this is not the centerpiece of the offense with or without Odell Beckham Jr. on the team. So those targets his targets aren't going to fluctuate that much. I don't think that they're going to go from 88. Now we have Odell Beckham and he's going to 40. That's not going to happen. He's too big of a piece of the team. So, and when you're talking about situations, I think you're talking about situations for long-term dynasty value, right? Because situation obviously affects, in the present tense or in the immediate future, but you're talking about like long-term, right? Like the reason why you had Njoku or you had the disparity between the two was because Evan Ingram was in this crappy situation and Odell Beckham was there and yada, yada, yada. I just don't think that the situation with Njoku is going to be it's going to affect him in the short term a little bit, but it's not going to be anything, detrimental to his long-term value.
Right. And I don't know, I'm looking at the one thing I would say for sure that I really like to do at tight end is I want to be safe at tight end in terms of the profile. Mm-hmm. And this does not change that for Njoku, right? This might cap some of the ceiling, but it does not change the floor.
I agree.
And with my roster construction, especially if you're playing tight lineups, I don't think you want to be rostering 3, 4, 5 tight ends, mm-hmm. When you're playing a 25-man non-premium roster, right? Or not, start 1. Yep. That's an inefficiency. Don't do that, right? So if I don't know, I think in this offense, Njoku can clearly be a top 10 tight end, right? And if that top 10 is somewhere between 6 and 10, I'm fine with that. I'm not really losing anything, and it's really stable in terms of what you can expect year over year, and that's exactly what I want at tight ends.
And I don't think that he was ever going to be in that top 3 tight end anyway, because that's not the player that he is. When you see that, you see these guys that are reliable down after down, whereas Njoku's he's the big play tight end. He's like Kittle in that he's getting 40-yard touchdown passes and rumbling into the end zone. So he's got that red zone threat ability, but because he's such a freak athlete, I mean, you're talking about he's in the top 90 or top 1% of athletes at his position in the NFL, like it and ever. So, I mean, this is not a guy who was going to be in the volume business. He was going to he was going to earn his living on big plays. So.
Yeah. And that's, I don't know. I think ultimately, when you look at players, and this is a lot of what we talk about WARP, and this probably isn't the time or place for a long WARP conversation, but when you look at WARP, it doesn't matter, right? Your roster, your season doesn't matter in terms of the up and down, week to week variance, right?
Yeah.
What matters is how many points you put up, right? And ultimately, I think we sort of get lost a little bit in the boom bust when we're talking about that, because it doesn't really matter. I personally don't think it matters. And in fairness, like if you're in the middle, I would rather have more variance, right? Unless you're an elite team, I would rather have variance on my team, because that means you can sort of outkick your coverage at times. So I'm not, I am fine sort of in the range of, 80 to 90 targets for Joku. I think that's fine going forward.
I agree.
If you were to say you'd give me that for the next 3 years, I would take it as a top 6 tight end and move on. What do you think in terms of? I don't think we've had this conversation. Real quick, you think Duke Johnson's on his way out?
So, I kind of get that impression. I don't think any chance that they were going to move him to the slot, I don't think was ever realistic anyway. I just didn't see that happening with him. They could have moved him to the slot last year and they didn't do it. I will say, I think it's about 50-50. And the reason is because I don't think they know what's going to happen with Kareem Hunt. Now, if Kareem Hunt has to serve a 1 or 2 game suspension, I think that they can get by without Duke Johnson. But if you're talking about 8 games or something like that, he is being relied on as the backup running back. They don't have a backup running back if they trade Duke Johnson, and Duke Johnson's not much of one anyway. So no, I guess I don't, I think it's 50-50. I think a lot of it is dependent on Kareem Hunt and what happens with his suspension.
Yeah, I think that's, call me skeptical on the big Kareem Hunt suspension. I think it's the under, but
yeah, me too.
I think there's some. I think they can get maybe a day 3 type return for Duke Johnson. And again, he doesn't really fit as being the backup to Nick Chubb, even if he was even if Kareem Hunt were to miss games. What do you think about the Giants? I mean, I saw someone put out on Twitter, and I got to start writing these things down because I can't remember who exactly it was, but they were like, there's not 5 players on that team that if everyone was cut, that people would be interested in right now. I'm not sure I go that far, but I mean, what do you think in terms of, they're going to be trailing,
Yes.
We've talked about Ingram. They're going to be trailing, right? They're going to need to throw the ball 600 and some odd times. What do you sort of think about how that offense looks in 2019?
Well, so the Ingram thing was baffling last year because if you look at his rookie year, or it's not baffling, but if you look at his rookie year, he was targeted a lot. He did very well. I watched a lot of Giants last year because I owned a lot of Giants. I owned Beckham in a bunch of leagues. I owned Ingram in a bunch of leagues, and I owned Saquon in a bunch of leagues. It seemed like they didn't throw to him until the 4th quarter. Like he wouldn't even get a target until the 4th quarter. So I think it kind of goes back to what he was his rookie season. I think he's going to be piece 2 in the offense. Like it's going to be Saquon Barkley and it's going to be him. I'm not afraid of Sterling Shepard, obviously. In terms of Barkley, you just mentioned about them being down. Fine by me, because they were down a lot last year and he was feasting in the last drives because Eli wants to dump it off. So I don't really have any issues with this affecting them, the players that I own on their team, in a negative way. I think Evan Ingram's going to do better than he did last year. I think he's going to be a bigger part of the offense. And then I think Saquon Barkley is going to be Saquon Barkley again. I'm not really concerned about it.
So they essentially add the 17th overall pick, and it looks like a third round pick. They already pick at 6. I just looked real quick at the draft value chart, the Jimmy Johnson chart that I use for the book.
Sure.
To calculate, the Jimmy Johnson chart that's been around for decades. I used it for the book to sort of talk about draft classes and positions and those sorts of things in terms of
what book was that?
It's the Analytics of Dynasty. You can find it at analyticsofdynasty.com/shop. The more I hang out with you, the more I do shameless plugs, and it's kind of
I make you do them. I mean, you need to get this stuff out. So
you do. Yeah. So the
Jimmy Johnson chart.
The Jimmy Johnson chart. I looked real quick as you were talking, and so they're going to have basically the 6th overall pick, which they earned. They're going to have 17. That gets them to number 2 overall. Mm-hmm. So again, we talk. There's narratives all this time, all year. The draft classes, the quarterback class is down. We might not have a top 10 pick. Bullpucky. Right. I mean, we could see quarterbacks go 1 and 2 in a quote down class. I think this has to be somewhat about that. Right. I mean, I think it's a combination of they were just sick and tired of Beckham's nonsense, which I get to a certain degree. I think they should have handled it differently. But at the same time, they might be putting themselves in a position where, hey, we can get up to 2 or we can get up to 1. Right. We have sort of the ammo to do that with on a guy that we were sort of souring on. Now, did they go about it wrong? I think so. But I sort of, if that's what they're thinking, I think they've armed themselves with the position to be able to move up. And you sort of look at the board, I don't think San Francisco has a need at 2. I don't think the Jets have a need at 3. We'll see what the Raiders do at 4. I don't think Tampa Bay has a need at 5, right? So there are the opportunities to move up in front of where the Giants are at 6. You figure that this has to put them in the conversation of being up for a quarterback would be sort of my thought.
Do you give them that much credit though? I thought the same thing, and then I'm like, I just feel like Gettleman is just. I just don't think the guy gets it. I mean, I'm with you. They could get up to like number 1 or trade up for a quarterback, but do you see them actually looking at Kyler Murray and saying, "Hey, we got to get up and get him"? Like, to me, they're better off grabbing Dwayne Haskins. I mean,
I think that's more likely.
So do I. That's what it has to be. But I don't think that they're going to move up to number 1 to take Haskins. Do you think that that's
no? But they can move up to 2 or 3 and take, you know what I mean. I mean,
he just seems like their type of quarterback.
Yes, more so than for sure, more so than Kyler Murray. Yeah, I agree with you.
I mean, we can't give Gettleman a ton of credit. I mean, his last 2 drafts, which one was last year and then one was before he got fired in Carolina. He's taken running backs in the top 10. Now they might be fantastic running backs, but I mean, you have NFL people that say I won't take a running back in the first round of the draft ever. So. I don't know that he's that competent. I mean, the other thing I was thinking is, are they taking an Odell Beckham replacement at 17 now? Because that might be N'Keal Harry. That might be. I don't think that it could be a DK Metcalf, but I mean, we hear rumblings about Hollywood Brown, and the NFL loves him. Like that's a boomer bust guy if I've ever seen him. Maybe that's what they're going to do there. I'm not sure. So
yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting. I mean, I there's a lot there, I think, in terms of speculation that's going to go on for the next couple of months. I guess I would just prime people for that. I mean, I would be but I don't think it hurts Saquon. I think it's going to help Ingram more in the market probably than I think it should have, because I was already high on him. Mm-hmm. And Sterling Shepard's probably going to be talked up, and I'm just not a huge fan. I think they have to draft a receiver. There's some guys still in free agency. I mean, do they make a move there? I mean, there's we'll see. I mean, I think there will probably be value somewhere in this offense this year. If it's maybe it's a whatever receiver's name isn't Sterling Shepard. So, real quick, what do you see? Is there any big moves today that sort of, any free agent moves that you just were like, wow?
Well, in dynasty relation, probably not. I mean, the fact that some of these guys are getting this money, like the CJ Mosley for $18 million a year or whatever it ended up being, is sheer insanity. I mean, the one that popped out to me was Funchess. Like, I couldn't believe that is who they were going to add to the Indianapolis offense. But at the same time, I said, this is a guy that I wouldn't mind. Like, I feel like it gives him like a little bit of a bump, because this is a guy now in the, I don't know, 16th, 17th round with, pretty good pedigree, and he's got some pretty good upside from an athletic profile. So he was one. I just worry about them hyping him up because he's going to Indy. I think in the teens, I think he's going to be a guy, we kind of share philosophies. So we don't normally take wide receivers later in drafts there. We're mostly going running backs and backup tight ends and, whatnot. I think that he's going to be a guy that I'm going to be able to grab later on and, kind of see some returns on it. So,
you know what the exception to the rule of don't draft wide receivers late is, right?
Well, there's several.
I think one of the most critical exceptions is don't draft don't take pie in the sky shots, right? Don't bet on people that have shown production, that have a good profile, that are depressed in price, right? That's basically the 3-prong test, right? Have shown something, good profile, down in price for whatever reason. He's going in the 15th round.
Yep.
I mean, that's, I'm not a big make a lot of bets on receivers in that range, but at that range, I mean, Greg Dortch, Josh Reynolds, Riley Ridley, Quincy Enunwa, Adam Humphries, Marquise Lee, who's coming off of a debilitating leg injury, Keyshawn Johnson, not the good one, Devontae Parker. I mean, he seems like and look, Indianapolis took a flyer on Eric Ebron last year, right? Yep. I mean, that's right. What sometimes you should chase smart franchises. What do smart franchises do? Buy low on profiles that are good.
Yeah, I mean, the guy was the 41st pick in the draft. Like, he was a high pick.
Yeah.
And, he was, an athletic
as a 21-year-old rookie at positional convert, right? Yep. So, yeah, I'm totally with you. Yeah. And go ahead.
There's another one, though.
Yeah.
Latavius Murray to the Saints. And that's probably especially interesting to you because you were touting him all last year.
Yeah. So, Latavius Murray is actually from the town that I live in right now. So, okay. It's pretty interesting. I think it's fascinating, man. I mean, my infatuation with backup running backs, but I own him. I look today, I think it's 21% of my leagues. It might even be more than that. I think there's one team that I haven't entered in my database that I own him on. So I'm at about a quarter of market share on him. I would imagine that I'm going to try and drive that up, although I don't think this news actually helps that possibility.
No.
We'll see. But yeah, I mean, that's a really good spot. And what's going to be a really good spot is if they draft a intriguing rookie there. It should make him absolutely dirt cheap, which is interesting. I'll be looking at the pricing on that too, the structure of that contract when the full information comes out. The one thing that I would note, I think I put this on Twitter earlier today. I did not agree with Buffalo's decision to draft Josh Allen last year at 7 overall. Trade up and draft Josh Allen. Everything that they have done with him since that moment has been exactly what they should do, right? The way that they, structure their offense, right? The way that they just keep bringing in guys who run 4-3-X. John, they brought in Corey Coleman, right? It didn't work out. They bring in Isaiah McKenzie, Robert Foster, right? Like, just keep bringing in guys that run really fast. I mean, Zay Jones was a 4.42 guy, right? Keep bringing in guys that run really fast. And you know what? Like you bring in John Brown, who can, I mean, talk about a great fit for what Josh Allen wants to do. And you know what? Like I've said for a while, like they should pay up for, give a day 3 pick for John Ross, because that's a poor man's version of Mahomes to Tyreek Hill. I mean, they can do things at levels of the field that no one else can defend. I mean, and you're stretching it all over the place with these guys. And I mean, the worst thing that they should do is draft a guy like N'Keal Harry, or DK Metcalf, excuse me. Like, just keep getting these guys that can just stretch you all over the place and get these cavernous throwing alleys for Allen. I think it's great. I think it's absolutely fascinating. Keep surrounding him with offensive talent. They get him a center, a tight end. I'm not a huge fan of Croft, but I get it. Beasley's a good, dependable set of hands, and you take a guy that can take the lid off like John Brown to go with a guy like Zay Jones, who I like probably more than the market, maybe not necessarily fantasy-wise, but I like him quite a bit with Robert Foster. I mean, there's no traditional number one, but I think when you look at how Josh Allen wins, they have a lot of guys that can complement him. And I don't think with a guy like Josh Allen that you want to necessarily, you shouldn't be investing in AJ Green type of wide receivers or Devontae Adams type receivers. I think you need to scheme him a little bit more. And I think you have guys that you can do it with. I think they have handled Josh Allen right. I didn't agree with the way that they went about drafting a quarterback, but since they did, I'm just glad to see that they've had the organizational clarity to actually do what it takes for a guy like Josh Allen to succeed. I applaud them for that. And I think that the Bills usually are a pretty regressive franchise, and I think they're fantastic on this front.
Yeah, you've been calling for John Brown to Buffalo for, I don't even know, a month now.
I said it on New Year's Eve. I found it on Twitter today.
Okay. So 3.5 months. And funny enough, I actually wanted him here in Cleveland. I really like John Brown. I'm actually kind of disappointed that they didn't get the Antonio Brown deal done, because I would have liked adding Antonio Brown to the mix and then getting John Brown on top of it. So I'm with you. I think that they should be going to like a spread speedy wide receiver offense that runs a bunch of vertical routes, 2 vertical routes on one play, 3 vertical routes on one play, just because Josh Allen can do it and take
Deep
some
overs
risks
for days, baby.
Yeah.
Deep
and then,
for days.
Yeah. So, I think, John Ross is, not John Ross. We were just talking about John Ross.
John Brown.
Yeah. John Brown. I think he's sneaky from a dynasty perspective. So he had some flashes last year, and now you're putting him in Buffalo. Like, could this be the John Brown that we saw in Arizona? I mean, he was fantasy viable week in and week out. So I like that too.
Yeah. Earl Thomas just signed with the Cleveland Browns.
Did he really?
Yep.
There was the other big move. I told you before the show. Yep. Dorsey is a genius.
Hey, how is the they've got to be the favorite to win the AFC North?
Oh, without question now.
Crazy.
So we talked about a little bit before we came on. The reason why this is like such a big deal for me as a Clevelander is I'm 35 years old and I've never seen the Browns be remotely good ever. Like I've just never seen them anywhere near good. Like thinking about you as, you are a Bills fan. Like I remember your Super Bowls. Like you might not have won, but you got to 4 of them. Like we have made the playoffs one time since 1999. Like think about that, one time in 20 years. So the fact that all of this is changing like it is very surreal. And I have had chills this entire podcast since I heard the news. I've gotten literally 40 texts since we've been on this. So this is insane. It's just crazy.
Certainly is. It certainly is.
Jordan, I think we should wrap it up. So Yeah, I think that we're probably going to do this a lot more when it comes to breaking news, because for whatever reason we can just hop on and do it and get the episodes out quick. So look for that in the future. You should definitely subscribe. We are on Podbean and we're waiting to get on iTunes. That should be coming up here shortly. So subscribe on either one and write reviews on either one. That would be great, because this is going to be a regular thing for us. So. So for Dynasty Football Analytics, I am Adam Wilson at AJWilly2 on Twitter, and my partner Jordan McNamara at McNamara Dynasty, and check out his book at analyticsofdynasty.com/shop. Have a good night.